Keeping maintenance up on your chainsaws, whether it's a pole saw or a regular gas-powered chainsaw, is an important thing to do. It allows you to use less effort to get the same job done and done quicker. Welcome back to Survival Existence. Before we get started sharpening a chain on this pole saw, we're going to go through a little bit of nomenclature. These are known as the teeth. These are known as rakers. Or that's what most people call them, as rakers. They're actually a depth gauge so that you can adjust how deep of a cut you have for each pass of each tooth on your chain. Quite often, especially in recent years, there's a lot less difference, quite often all 20 to 25 thousandths difference between the front of the tooth and this raker or depth gauge, and they do that in order to keep kickback from happening quite as often and being quite as serious. But of course, whenever you do that, it takes longer to cut through a limb. I quite often like to get them down to at least 25 thousandths difference, and more times than not around 30 thousandths, perhaps just a little bit more. You have to be careful because of the kickback and how much difference you have between the front of this tooth and your depth gauge. It not only can cause more kickback, but it also causes more wear and tear on your saw and will bog it down. In case of this electric pole saw, it can either burn the motor out or pop the breaker. And in the case of gas saws, it'll bog it down and of course cause engine damage if you do it too much too long, overheating. This is a flat file, and this is a gauge for measuring the height difference between the front of your teeth and your depth gauges. I've already filed a little bit on these depth gauges and just a little bit on the teeth. And if you know anything about sharpening a blade, such as a knife, normally you run it across a stone against the edge. With a chain, for whatever reason, it's directly opposite. And this tooth, instead of going in this way with your chainsaw file, you'll actually go in this way. And you can buy chainsaw files. In this particular case, these teeth are 3/16, which this is a 3/16 inch file. These are good to an extent because it'll tell you what degree to hold your file at. Now, whether you work it back and forth like this is entirely up to you, but nonetheless, you need to keep the teeth at the same angle, degree angle, as what it originally came with. Some higher speed saws and competition saws have a lot sharper angle on the tooth to make it cut quicker. That can create a problem as far as wear with the normal everyday user, whether you're using it around the home, a farm, or homestead. In order to make the chain and the edge last longer, there's less of an angle on the sharp part of your teeth. That, like I said, makes the chain last longer and cuts better longer. In the end, it's best to do it that way. Your chain manufacturers, I have to assume, know what they're doing, so I leave the tooth angle the same regardless. Now with these, this particular chain is actually at a 30-degree angle, which shows right here. Whenever I sharpen this tooth, I need to try to keep this file at a 30-degree angle, which is just like that. Okay, like I was saying, these teeth or the edge is at a 30-degree angle, which would be just like that. Whenever you sharpen these teeth, you usually only drag them across about 5 times, then move on to the next tooth. it is extremely important that you remove the same amount of material from each tooth, and for that matter, each depth gauge. And it's also necessary to keep the chain very stable, very still. It's actually best to put your chainsaw in a vise to hold it good and still as you work your file. Right here inside, it's cold outside, so I'm doing this inside for right now. So I'm just going to hold it as best I can. And really, you should wear a pair of gloves. My hands have become extremely tough over the years. For as long as I did maintenance work, I've had my hands cut all to pieces. They'll still get cut, but it's more difficult than it is for most people. But what you're supposed to do is, when you're using one of these files that are made for sharpening chainsaws, you let the base of this ride on the teeth on the chain, and it or on the links of the chain, and it allows it to cut in the right position inside of each one of these teeth. That's another reason why it's important that you go ahead and sharpen your teeth before you file down your depth gauges. But keep it at the angle that it's at. If this thing was set at 25 degrees, then I would bring this file and make sure and file it just like that. This one's not. This one is actually at about 30 degrees. I'm going to slide that file down inside that tooth and let this ride on top of these teeth. I'm going to start with this one. If you'll notice, it's at 30 degrees, just right here. And I'm going to make about 5 passes, then I'll move on to the next tooth. And I'm going to drag this backwards, leaving no pressure on it. A file cuts from the rad end forward, just like this. It does not cut dragging back. Besides that, it really does mess up your file. Okay, now I'll move to the next tooth, which will be, this is the next tooth, but it sharpens this way, and I'll go to the other side in order to file it the right direction. Oh yeah, very good and sharp. Okay, all the teeth on this side are sharp enough. I'm going to go to the other side and sharpen them from there. Get the other teeth. Hey, I believe that about has them sharpened. Let me hit this one just a little bit more. Much, much better. Okay, I believe that actually has it done. In just a minute, we'll get outside and use it on a limb or two on a tree that's off the back of my porch. We'll see how well the job it did. Be back in just a minute. Needless to say, it doesn't take a whole lot to cut the limbs off of a tree, but having your equipment good and sharp, as in this pole saw and sharpening the chain on it, makes very quick work of a fairly short job. This has been Bobby with Survival Existence, helping you help yourself. Come visit us on Facebook, visit us at our website, and also visit us, of course, here on YouTube at Survival Existence. Good day.